Well, I'm Grant Howard, president of the Howard Group, and today I'm speaking with Ewan Webster, who's the CEO of Thesis Gold, which has been one of the hotter junior gold exploration plays over the last few months. Last November, the stock was around or a little bit under $1.30. Hit a high in January, $3 or so, and even in this volatile market, as of this recording, is still sitting in the 230 range. And just as a reminder to viewers, Thesis's ranch property is in British Columbia, is what's called the prolific Golden Horseshoe. Ewan, everything we talk about today, I'd like to frame in and around simplifying how you're putting together all the pieces of the puzzle in regards to this property, and why you believe there's a high probability of ultimate economic success, which is another way of saying shareholders are going to be very happy. Speaking of shareholders, you've just come off of a very successful and well oversubscribed $24 million raise. And Eric Sprott is a major new shareholder. So just to tell folks that obviously there are some key individuals and funds in behind Thesis now. So let's get into it. Last year, being 2021, Thesis kicked off a maiden drill program, and you had some very good success. Again, being one of those pieces of the puzzle, can you get into some of the highlights from that 16,000 meter drill program and how this fits into the grand scheme?
Sure. Thanks, Grant. Yeah, I mean, a very successful maiden drill program for us. Some of the key highlights that really stand out to me are confirmation of the historical drill intercepts from past programs, and that is really going to allow us to use those fantastic results in a future resource. Secondly, both expansion along strike and at depth of a number of the known zones of mineralization on the project. And probably more importantly and more excitingly, two new discoveries to date. At Thesis 3, a new parallel west zone that returned 28 meters at 6 grams per ton gold, and a south zone at Thesis 2 that returned 49 meters of 1.3 grams per ton gold as well. So I think that really speaks to the caliber of the discovery potential on the ranch project.
Then, in regards to the property itself, from which part are you still expecting to get or see results?
So most of the outstanding results are really from exploration targets, so conceptual targets that share a lot of the same characteristics as the known zones of mineralization in terms of geochemical response and geophysical response, and we look forward to sharing those results as they become available in the near future.
And we're looking forward to that. And speaking of targets, have you delineated any new targets? Because you've got a pretty wide, property-wide exploration program that you have undertaken and are going to be undertaking.
We did indeed. I mean, the ranch project just now is just over 180 square kilometers, and 90% of that land position saw very little, if any, historical work on the project, let alone any sort of modern systematic exploration program. And we really focused in on that last year. We collected over 7,000 soil samples, over 700 rock samples, completed detailed geological mapping, ground and airborne geophysics. And that approach has proven very successful in delineating a whole range of new targets for us. And one such example would be Albert's Hump, where we've defined a multi-element pathfinder soil anomaly that extends over 2+ kilometers. It's wide open to the northeast and to the southwest, and is also coincident with a multi-kilometer alteration system that's mapped on surface, a fault network defined by ground magnetics, and a coincident IP geophysical anomaly as well. So all those various aspects of the exploration program are giving us a lot of confidence in our targeting process, and we're really looking forward to drilling that particular target this summer, as well as a number of others that share those same characteristics across the land position.
Well, it's tough for people because when it comes to mining, resource, junior exploration, it's very difficult for people to understand all of the technical aspects. But what you're saying here is you are beginning to put more and more definition in and around the potential of this property, correct?
Correct. That's exactly it.
want to get to another topic here. There's been some discussion over the past few months about the Bonanza zone, which is key to Thesis. And there's an old report going back to the 2010 area or era or so, a Guardsman report, was talking about some of the possible limitations within that Bonanza zone. Can you address some of the possible issues that were raised in that report?
Sure. If I remember, I think it's the technical report by Barney Bowen, which it does a really good job of documenting the mineralization across the ranch project at the time, and more specifically summarizing the mineralization of the Bonanza zone. And he certainly points to some issues with the Bonanza zone. If I remember correctly, those are really the lack of historical drill core from the project in general, but specifically Bonanza, inconsistencies in the various vintages of drill results, and the lack of grade at depth. And I think, as part of our 2021 drill program, we addressed those issues. Firstly, we designed a very systematic drill program across the Bonanza zone, which did a number of things for us. It's going to allow us to use those fantastic historical drill results in a future resource. And that had to be done. I mean, why would we not utilize that information? It also, with the Bonanza zone seeing most of the historical work on the project, it was an obvious area for us to start the program. It really gives a great understanding of the geology, the mineralizing system, the alteration system, and we were able to use that knowledge to really embark on and guide the remainder of the drill program through 2021. And ultimately, I think without that knowledge, it really wouldn't have led to the discovery of the West Zone at Thesis 3 and the South Zone at Thesis 2. So it proved to be very effective. And I guess, secondly, then, the results that we got from our 2021 program at Bonanza are certainly in line with the early 1980s drilling. So the higher grade results from the Bonanza zone. So validating those results. And again, that is key to being able to use those historical intercepts in a future resource, validating that 1980s drilling. And then finally, I think one of the concerns was the lack of grade at depth. And actually, to me, that is not very surprising in a high sulfidation epithermal system. And I honestly think that's a bit of a positive for the project as a whole, which might sound a little bit weird, but I'll explain. At Bonanza and a number of other zones on the project, the mineralization is really controlled by major kind of bounding fault structures. And it's these structures that acted as the conduits to that kind of mineralizing fluid. So the fluids have come up carrying the gold mineralization. And as the fluids have come up these faults, they're passing through various different volcanic units. And at Bonanza, for example, one of those units had more porosity in it, or basically space within the rock that allowed those fluids to move out into that volcanic rock, creating a kind of tabular body of mineralization. And I think there's actually a diagram in the report illustrating exactly that. And if you can imagine from the historical drilling, if you're just drilling through this tabular body, there's certainly not going to be anything below it because it's controlled by the volcanic host rock. Certainly the structures themselves, those extend to depth, and those are the conduits to the gold mineralization. And we understand these very well now and haven't tested them as yet at depth. But why I think this is actually a plus for the project is if you look at analogs of other high sulfidation epithermal systems, those that are primarily controlled by just fault systems, they're typically around 1 million ounces or less. Whereas those projects that have the element of control within the volcanic rocks as well, they can be much, much bigger. And there's a lot of examples where those are in the multi-million ounce potential. So I really see this as a positive that we understand this control now. And I think in the report as well, Barney points to that with a diagram showing that there's a stratigraphic control to the mineralization, and it's these primary fault structures that actually control the mineralization, with a number of targets at depth as well that have never been drill tested. And I guess to me as well, it's worth remembering that the Bonanza zone, although it has had most of the work on the ranch project, and with certainly some very impressive numbers, it's just one zone of many. And coupled with the discoveries that we've made as part of the 2021 program and expanding zones, I think regardless of how big the Bonanza zone gets, it's just one piece and the expanding mineralized footprint that we have on the ranch project. And ultimately, whether it's the Bonanza zone or the Thesis zone, they're all likely fed by this underlying heat engine that's driving all of the mineralization. So they're kind of genetically related to one another anyway.
Well, I think a lot of detail, but that's good, and very delicately flipped into the discussion about how potentially this could be a multi-million ounce find. I liked how you flipped that one in there. But that was good. That was good. Now, also on those boards, and I don't want to dwell on this too much.
Sure.
People have asked why Guardsman didn't spend any money or very little money on the ranch project, because I'm sort of thinking of this as, and it's not unusual for the second or third or fourth resource company to take over a property and then they find the pot of gold, literally. When many others, including some large companies, have worked properties, it's not all that unique. Others have been property first. Another company comes in, and then through new technology, whatever it may be, they discover or make the big discovery. But just back on the Guardsman question, any insight as to why it didn't spend money?
Certainly. I mean, I spoke to Doug Sarkissian, the president of Guardsman Resources, who's also a director on Thesis, many times about this. And Guardsman is a private company. They also have a portfolio of projects and always have done. And they have a small team, which that team has actually done, whether they've done joint ventures or optioned the projects out to people historically, it's the Guardsman team that's typically done the exploration work on the project. So they have very limited resources, a very limited budget. And at the time the report was written in 2012, the ranch project itself was in terms of the claim position, was in good standing for years. So they didn't have to do any work on it. And that wasn't the case for a number of their other projects. So with their limited resources, they were focusing their efforts on advancing and keeping in good standing the remaining portfolio of the projects. And when we acquired the ranch project, it was an all-share deal with Guardsmen, and they're still the largest shareholder in Thesis and haven't sold a share to date. And if anybody talked to Doug, he would tell you that out of the Guardsman portfolio, the ranch project is his favorite and always has been, and that he thinks there's significant upside on the project. So hopefully that explains why Guardsman didn't focus their efforts on ranch.
Okay, enough of Guardsman. Let's move on. But we will still stay on the topic of money. As I said at the beginning of our discussion, raised just over $24 million recently. You currently have around $35 million in the bank, which is outstanding. Not a lot of shares out. And Eric Sprott came in as one of your strategic investors. Have you spoken with Eric to start?
I have indeed, yeah. And
okay, and I won't ask you to disclose anything, but maybe in a general sense, you can tell us without trying to put too many words into his mouth why Eric thought, okay, I need to put some money into these.
Well, I think Eric's invested in the Tudagon region before, primarily in benchmark metals. So he knows the region really well and clearly believes there's significant exploration potential in the Tudagon region of kind of north central British Columbia, and more specifically, the Ranch project. And I think the team likely played a role in it as well. I mean, we have a proven track record of success in the area, and we've been able to accelerate the exploration and advancement of the Ranch project with continued stakeholder engagement. So we're moving this along very quickly. It's in a fantastic jurisdiction, and there's a lot of upside in this very underexplored Tudagon region, specifically the Ranch project.
Okay, well, Eric, like everybody else, he doesn't put $1 into something unless he figures he's going to turn it into 2, 3, or 10. On the topic of the future, you're just kicking off or preparing to kick off the 2022 drill program, or to start with 10,000 meters. So, in summary, what are you going to target? And then how does that play into a larger drill program for the fall?
Sure. So yeah, the spring program is well underway now. And really it's focused on what's shaping up to be a pretty prolific gold corridor in the Thesis structural corridor that extends over about 1.5 kilometers in length. And we're really following up on the new discoveries that were made at the Thesis zones. So at Thesis 2, the south zone, where we drilled 49 meters of 1.27 grams per ton gold, and at Thesis 3 and the west zone, where we drilled 28 meters of 6 grams. And both of these zones have only got a handful of drill holes into them, and they're open in every direction. So really a key focus of this year's program, or the spring program, is following up on those discoveries. At the same time, though, we have a range of exploration targets at the kind of northern end of the structural corridor, where the historic Bingo zone is. And that zone saw a handful of drilling back in the 1980s with some good gold results, but not really been followed up on. And we've delineated a range of exploration targets around that we feel are stronger targets. So they will be drilled as part of this spring program as well. So a lot of exciting things going on now. And really what the knowledge that we gain from this spring program will feed into the much larger kind of 50,000, collectively 50,000 meter drill program that we're doing in 2022, with most of that work being in the summer.
Right. Sounds like you're really setting things up for 2023. And I want to throw a question out to you about, let's say everything goes well this year, sure, and you're in a position where potentially you could quantify the resource next year sometime, let's say potentially. And I want to frame this in context of what happened just a few months ago with Great Bear Resources. Kinross took them out at $29 a share. And if you go back just a few years ago, Great Bear was a 50-cent stock. And Bob Moriarty, who's a well-known resource writer, did an article a few months ago and said that based on the stage that Thesis is at, your results are better than what Great Bear had at this particular part of the development and the exploration of their property. And Great Bear never did a reserve report. And yet it was a huge, huge win for Great Bear shareholders. So if you get to the point of where you could do one, will you bother, or do you think, and again, we'll put all of the disclaimers around this, do you think that there is a higher probability that somebody in a large company will say, gee, maybe we would better go look at Thesis and some sort of, I'm not talking valuation necessarily, but a similar scenario to what happened with Great Bear?
I mean, I think a lot of companies are often driven towards getting the resource out as soon as possible. And from what we've discussed so far, at Thesis and the Ranch project, with expanding zones of mineralization, with numerous new discoveries from last year's program, I mean, the zones are still expanding and growing that we know about already, certainly. The ongoing drill program that we have at the moment is expanding on those zones, and it's going to influence the summer program as well, the much larger 50,000 meter program. And part of that program is, continuing to expand these zones, but also testing a whole range of new epithermal and porphyry targets. And assuming continued success with our drill programs, my personal opinion is that the ranch project is still going to be growing and evolving. So at that time, looking into 2023, I think we'd have to evaluate where we stand in terms of a resource.
A very nice way of saying, let's keep it growing and keep the mystery around it. With that, back to you, and we're going to wrap. Thank you. And obviously, Thesis will have a great deal to talk about throughout 2022. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ron.